and said, "Your sister is pregnant, so we're giving her your $92,000 law school fund. You can work your way through school. It builds character." My sister, Chloe, smirked, waiting for me to explode, cry, or scream. Instead, I just smiled, took a sip of water, and calmly said, "Okay." I even stood up and gave my tearful mother a comforting hug before heading upstairs to my bedroom. They thought they had completely broken me, stripped away my future, and handed it to the golden child on a silver platter. But they didn't know I had been expecting this exact betrayal for months. As I sat on my bed, my phone suddenly lit up with a massive bank alert. Exactly 10 minutes later, a blood-curdling scream echoed from downstairs, shouting my name. My name is Amber, and I am 29 years old. To understand why a single text message could cause my family's entire world to implode, you have to understand the dynamic I grew up in. For as long as I can remember, my younger sister, Chloe, was the undisputed golden child. If Chloe wanted something, my parents would move mountains to give it to her. If I achieved something, it was completely ignored. I spent my entire life working myself to the bone, maintaining a flawless GPA and sacrificing my social life, all because my grandfather had promised me a $92,000 educational trust fund specifically reserved for my dream of attending law school. But 3 weeks before that fateful dinner, I accidentally uncovered a secret. While looking for a missing tax document on my dad's laptop, I found an email thread between my parents and a financial planner. They were actively planning to raid my grandfather's trust, intending to bypass the system and transfer the lump sum directly into Chloe's personal account to fund an extravagant lifestyle. They thought I was oblivious. What they didn't realize was that I immediately contacted the trust's managing bank. As the primary beneficiary, I couldn't withdraw the money early, but I could implement a strict legal tripwire. I authorized a security alert that would trigger the moment anyone attempted an unauthorized transfer. My parents thought they were setting a trap for me, but they had no idea they were walking straight into mine. The atmosphere at the dinner table that evening was suffocatingly tense, heavy with the weight of my past struggles. Chloe sat across from me, dabbing away weaponized tears with a silk napkin, while my mother anxiously fussed over her. Finally, my dad cleared his throat, leaning forward to deliver the blow they had been preparing for weeks. "Your sister is pregnant, Amber," he said, his voice dripping with a forced, authoritative calmness. "She and her boyfriend need stability. So, we've decided to give her your $92,000 law school fund to help them buy a house and set up a nursery. You're smart and resilient. You can work your way through school. It builds character." Chloe smirked from behind her napkin, her eyes gleaming with triumph as she waited for my inevitable breakdown. My parents braced themselves for a screaming match, expecting me to fight for my future. Instead, I let a wave of total, calculated calm wash over me. I took a slow sip of my water, looked directly at my father, and simply said, "Okay." The smirk instantly vanished from Chloe's face, replaced by utter confusion. My parents blinked in stunned silence. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply stood up, walked over to my mother, and wrapped my arms around her trembling shoulders, giving her a comforting hug. "Don't worry, Mom. If Chloe needs it, she should have it," I whispered softly. I turned and walked upstairs, leaving a completely bewildered, deeply unsettled family sitting at the table below me. The moment I closed my bedroom door, the deceptive calm of the dining room evaporated. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring intensely at my phone as the seconds ticked away. Right on cue, exactly 10 minutes later, my screen lit up with a massive, bright red notification from the trust's managing bank. The security tripwire had been snapped. My parents had wasted no time. They had literally logged onto their accounts at the dinner table to execute the wire transfer, eager to lock in their theft before I could change my mind. But their greed blinded them to the legal reality of my grandfather's trust. The foundational bylaws explicitly stated that these funds could only be disbursed directly to the billing department of an accredited, verified law school. By attempting to reroute all $92,000 into Chloe's personal checking account for a wedding and nursery, they hadn't just initiated a transfer, they had triggered an automatic felony fraud alert. Within seconds, The bank's security system permanently froze the entire trust asset under lockdown, flagged my parents' personal bank accounts for suspicious activity, and initiated an immediate compliance audit. Then, the silence of the house was violently shattered. A loud, scraping sound echoed as chairs were thrown backward downstairs, followed by a blood-curdling scream from my mother that rattled the walls. "Amber, what did you do? Amber." My father's booming, furious voice roared up the stairwell. They had walked right into the trap. That terrifying roar from my father was the final signal I needed. I didn't stay to argue, nor did I look back to watch them scramble as the bank froze their accounts. While they were downstairs panicking over their ruined financial reputation, I quietly packed 2 suitcases with my absolute essentials, slipped out the back door, and vanished into the night, cutting contact entirely. The next 8 years became a grueling testament to pure, unadulterated survival. I worked double shifts at a local diner, surviving on cheap coffee and 4 hours of sleep, while maintaining top grades to secure a merit-based academic scholarship. I conquered law school completely alone, driven by a burning desire to prove that my character didn't need to be built on their cruel betrayal. Today, I am a senior partner at one of the most prestigious corporate law firms in the state. But while I was rising, my family was systematically crumbling under the weight of their own choices. Through mutual acquaintances, I occasionally caught glimpses of their reality. Chloe's hasty marriage dissolved in less than 2 years after her husband realized my parents were completely broke. Without my grandfather's trust to bail her out, her extravagant lifestyle quickly collapsed into a mountain of credit card debt. My parents, true to their enabling nature, had remortgaged their own home to fund Chloe's failed business ventures, including a boutique clothing line that went completely bankrupt within months. They had spent nearly a decade spoiling the golden child, pouring every cent they had into a bottomless pit of entitlement, only to end up in deep financial ruin themselves. They thought they had stripped away my future, but they had actually signed the warrant for their own destruction. 8 years of absolute silence were shattered on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my large oak desk, reviewing a multi-million-dollar acquisition contract, when my intercom buzzed. My executive secretary's voice sounded unusually hesitant. "Ms. Amber, there are 3 people in the lobby without an appointment. They claim to be your family, and they refuse to leave until they see you." A cold shiver ran down my spine, but I maintained my composure. "Send them in, Rachel," I replied calmly. When the door opened, the contrast in the room was deafening. I stood tall in a perfectly tailored, sharp navy blue power suit, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Walking toward me were 3 ghosts from my past, looking completely defeated. My parents had aged drastically. My father's once booming posture was hunched and frail, and my mother looked fragile, her eyes red and puffy from crying. Between them stood Chloe, disheveled, wearing worn-out clothes that were a far cry from her past designer outfits. The moment the heavy door clicked shut behind them, my mother dropped her purse and fell to her knees right on my office rug, sobbing uncontrollably. My father bowed his head, tears streaming down his wrinkled face, while Chloe stared at the floor in absolute shame. "Amber, please," my father whispered, his voice cracking with deep desperation. "We were so wrong. We have suffered for 8 long years. Please, we are begging for your forgiveness." I watched them weep, completely unmoved by the dramatic display unfolding on my office floor. For a fleeting second, it almost looked like genuine remorse. They spent the next few minutes sobbing about how much they regretted that fateful dinner table betrayal, playing the family is everything card with practiced precision. My mother kept repeating how they had been blinded by Chloe's sudden pregnancy and how they had spent every single day of the last 8 years wishing they could take back their cruel words. They pleaded for a second chance, begging me to let them back into my life so we could finally be a whole family again. But I hadn't spent nearly a decade mastering the art of reading people and analyzing hidden motives just to be fooled by a few tears. Using my sharp legal instincts, I quietly observed the subtle details. The frantic way Chloe kept checking her phone, the specific legal folder my father was tightly clutching under his arm, and the fact that they had tracked down my high-end corporate office instead of my home. "Cut the act," I said, my voice cutting through their crying like ice. "Why are you really here?" The tears stopped almost instantly. My father swallowed hard, slowly placing the folder on my desk. The truth finally came out, and it was entirely transactional. Chloe was facing a massive fraud and breach of contract lawsuit from her failed boutique venture, and my parents' home was on the very brink of foreclosure because they had co-signed her loans. They didn't want my love or my forgiveness. They wanted a brilliant, high-powered lawyer to bail them out of $1 million legal nightmare for free. I stared at the folder on my desk, a cold smile touching my lips as I delivered my final, devastating refusal. "No," I said calmly. "8 years ago, you told me that struggling to survive builds character. Well, now it's your turn to build some." I picked up the folder and dropped it right back into my father's trembling hands. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't scream, and I didn't show anger. I simply pressed the button on my intercom and asked security to politely escort them out of the building. As they were marched away, weeping and screaming my name down the hallway, I felt absolutely nothing but a profound sense of closure. They had made their choices, and now they had to live with the legal and financial consequences. Today, my life in my beautiful new home is filled with complete peace, entirely untainted by their greed and toxic manipulation. I proved to myself, and to them, that I never needed their stolen money to build a successful future. Now, I'm deeply curious about everyone listening to my story today. What would you have done if you were in my exact position? Would you have helped them? Or would you have walked away just like I did? Include the city you are watching from so I can see exactly how far my story has reached. I'm also leaving 2 other shocking stories on the end screen that will completely surprise